Hello, hello, hello. Let's go live. All right. Hello, hello, hello. We are live. The NAACP New York State Conference is live for our first monthly briefing, where we are checking in. So we're going to leave a few minutes to let the room fill up. And if you are dropping into the room right now, drop in the comments or anything and tell me if you are a member of a branch. Tell me what branch. Tell me what city, what state that you are chiming in from. Let me know what is going on where you are. Are you watching from Rochester? Are you watching from Syracuse? Are you on Long Island, Strong Island, if you fancy? Are you in the 5 boroughs? Let us know where, and if you are a member of NAACP. Who am I? I am L. Joy Williams. I am the president. Lovely to be honored to be the president of the NAACP New York State Conference. And we have the opportunity this evening. We wanted to jump on this live stream. We're on YouTube, we're on Instagram. I'm sharing on my personal pages, and I'm so glad that y'all are joining. Before we get started and digging into what we have to discuss this evening, I want to take this moment to ask you to share in the comments or wherever platform you are watching us, to share where you are watching us from. This is the NAACP New York State Conference. I have the honor and the privilege of being president of the NAACP New York State Conference. And shortly we will be joined by our executive director, Chris Alexander, who will also be joining us. And we're going to spend some time tonight digging into what's at stake for us here in the New York State legislative session. I can spend hours talking about what's at stake with us in terms of this political landscape, this moment that we are in, where our colleagues on in the West Coast are dealing with a perilous situation. We are dealing with the same situation here on the East Coast and other places, New Jersey, Long Island, where people are being stripped from their families and picked up off the streets. We want to honor that space, and we will continue to highlight the injustices that are happening all across not only this country, but obviously happening all across the world. But tonight, we are focusing our conversation about what's at stake at the end of this legislative session, the bills that we are pushing, and how you can get involved, because we need all hands on deck as we continue to push equitable agenda here in the state of New York. And as I said, let me know in the chat where you're watching from. Make sure to stay engaged with us. You can drop your questions and your comments. We're going to read them live and stay engaged. And if you are already a member of NAACP, of course, welcome friends, welcome members. But if you're not already a member of the NAACP, now is the time, because we are organizing across the state and we need you in the fight. So you can head to our website, our lovely new website, nysnaacp.org/join. And you can tap the link in the bio if you're watching on Instagram, and you can join and be a part of what we are building here at the New York State Conference. And we also want to invite you to be part of our rapid response team. This is the crew that will get all of the alerts when it's time to call the legislature, when it's time to call the governor's office, or we need to rally around urgent issues and things like that. You can sign up for that right now. We'll talk more about that later, but we'll drop it. You can see the rapid response is nysnaacp.org/rapid response. So we are building that up because when we say we need you to call the legislature, to call the assembly, who is wavering on a particular bill, or call the Senate, or call the governor. We need a team of folks that will actually pick up the phone and make those calls. And so we need you to be part of that team. So we're also going to bring some powerful voices to the space tonight, legislators and advocates who are in the trenches with us. We are in coalition together, pushing some of these bills. And then because we do have representation, we do have members of the NAACP who happen to also be legislators. We are going to bring their voice to the table and talk to them about what is being pushed in these final days of session. And so just really quick, while I'm waiting for our executive director to come on, what do I mean when I say the end of the legislative session? So everybody is focusing their attention right now, Chris Alexander, who's our executive director, is focusing their attention obviously on what's happening in Washington and happening in Congress, but we have legislative action here happening in New York State, and that is in the form of our state legislature, our state assembly, our state senate, and they are in session until when?
Next couple of days. I think the Senate has the next couple of days, and the Assembly may go a little further, but
yeah,
it's done.
So we've already passed the budget, right? So the legislature and the governor passed the budget, but they still have a few more days. There are still laws that can be made. And we have a legislative agenda that we have been pushing, some of which we were able to push forward through the budget season. Now that we're past the budget season, like you said, we have these final days to the legislative session. And there's some things we wanted to bring to people's attention that if we can get some movement on, that we can actually get past. And so Chris Alexander, who is the NAACP New York State Conference Executive Director, has been hands-on in moving our legislative agenda on the state level. Chris, there's some stuff we've been pushing. What have we been pushing these final days?
Well, we do have a robust legislative agenda. There's a ton of bills that would address what we have known to be a longstanding environmental crisis here in the state, trying to ensure that we're paying more attention to what's going into our land, what's going into our air, as well as our water. We also have, and we'll hear a little bit more soon from the chair of the Black, Puerto Rican, Hispanic Nation Legislative Caucus to talk about the justice and reform agenda. Some of those bills are bills that we've been pushing to decarcerate New York State prisons and make sure that people who are incarcerated in the state are treated humanely. Of course, this is coming on the heels of the murder of Robert Brooks earlier this year, which kind of started off session with the clear mandate to the legislature to address what's going on in New York State prisons. We've had a ton of issues that we've had to engage on. But now, as we close out session, we see that much has not yet been done, and these issues have not yet been addressed. And so, eager to see some movement and some action there. We're also, a large part of our agenda is also addressing the policy changes, directional changes, disruption, firing of officials on the federal level, making sure that New York is able to uphold those principles and ensure the protection of people's constitutional rights. So a lot of issues and obviously not a lot of time. And, the thing about these legislative sessions, once they start again in January, we'll pick up the fight, but eager to see what can be done in these next couple of days to make sure that New York is a safe and equitable place.
That's, one of the pieces that you have briefed me on and that we've been engaged on in coalition is on reform as it pertains to the prison populations in the state of New York, as well as a number of issues related to prison reform. And we do have someone to bring into our discussion to talk about that. This is the chair of the Black, Puerto Rican, Hispanic, and Asian Legislative Caucus, who we worked with on a number of different things previously. Assembly member Michelle Salages, who is the chair of the caucus. Thank you so much for taking the time in these final days of session for coming and talking to our members and to our larger community about what is moving forward in these final days. Thank you so much.
And I just appreciate the opportunity to always work with you, Eljoy and Chris, especially with the NAACP, advocating for our communities, especially our Black communities and those incarcerated. So thank you for this opportunity.
No problem. So how, as caucus chair, so speaking for the larger caucus, how is the caucus identifying and moving priorities forward on behalf of the caucus?
So we are a coalition of members, and it's about 75 plus of us between the Assembly and the Senate. We are bipartisan, and we exist all across this great state, from Buffalo all the way to Montauk. And what's wonderful about this coalition of members is that we have positions in the legislature, whether it's a chair or committee membership or just advocacy. We have standing. There's so many of us that you can't ignore. And so for us, we use our political will and power to change that dynamic and shape the conversation. And so when we talk about the Robert Brooks death, we know that this is not an isolated incident. It's a pattern of violence, neglect, and lack of transparency. And we felt, as Chris said, it's a mandate that we cannot just say, oh, well, another death, but actually take our pain and put it into purpose.
I appreciate that. And I think that there is a number of things that we need to do on the prison reform front as we continue to reduce the population, right, Chris?
Yeah. And I think, we also have seen just in recent days some activity from that agenda that you all have put out. I mean, obviously you can talk about the agenda, but want to also highlight some of the necessary reforms there.
Yeah, definitely. We know that our correctional facilities are broken. And Speaker Hasty and Andrea Stewart-Cousins, Leader Andrea Stewart-Cousins, I want to give them thanks because they've been responsive to us. They see that our correctional facilities are not about rehabilitation, but more about punishment and punitive. And people are not able to walk out and return to society because of trauma, because of abuse. And so we're trying to fix a system that's severely broken. But our first step in this conversation is making sure that we have transparency, accountability, and oversight. And so as a caucus, we decided, okay, we can change the whole system. We can fight pathways to parole, pathways for de-incarceration. But we also want to make sure that we get to the heart of transparency and accountability for this first step, because unfortunately, we don't have the political will of the entire legislature or the executive to get certain things done. And so our first step is to really come up with, we came up with a blueprint as a caucus. We came up with a set of about 20 bills that we felt we could get done this session, and we presented it to our leaders as a pathway to start fixing some of these issues. So we could talk more about what the bills were, but some of it was that if a loved one dies within the correctional facility, there's notice. Something as simple as that. We expanded independent oversight in our legislative priorities. We tried to require timely access to evidence, making sure that we get rid of blind spots in correctional facilities and in medical spaces, because as we saw with Robert Brooks, they didn't really have cameras on the walls. It's because of the body camera footage that we saw what happened. And so we want to make sure that there's complete camera coverage and that we expand also the independent authority of different entities with independent oversight.
I appreciate that. So let me ask you very, very clean. What do you believe that would help, right? Because I talk about sometimes we need to push you all in the legislature to do more, and then sometimes we need to provide the backup as you are trying to do more. So I'm going to ask this in two ways. What are the things that we need to do to provide the backup to get some of these done?
It's going to be a long-term game. It's going to require us to educate our communities and our non-communities as well, educating and going to different spaces and places and letting them know that going into a correctional facility is not providing real care and fixing individuals who've had, severe, whether mental breakdown, substance abuse, trauma. We need to fix these spaces. So first of all, we need to educate people about legislation that's before us. So we have the second look back, we have earned time, we have many parole bills, like making sure we get our elderly folks out of the system who have been there since the Rockefeller drug laws. We need to make sure that folks understand that these bills exist and that they are not a hindrance to our community, but they actually help bring justice and fairness back to the system. And then for the short-term gain, we have a set of bills that we're pushing and we're going to reveal soon and vote on in the next few days. So I encourage folks on this live stream to educate the community and call your legislators and say, vote on this current transparency package and get it to the floor so that we can begin the process of healing. But really, in my eyes, it's a long-term game. We need to make sure that not only you join NAACP and learn about what you need to do, but be educated on the bills that could really change the dynamic for Black and Brown communities.
Thank you so much for that. That's really important. And this is why we're establishing the rapid response team that we are. And I'm going to put that back up on the screen right now for folks to join because, folks are busy, right? And they say they don't have the time to, learn everything or know when everything is coming up. And that's why we're creating this, right? So, you'll get the alert from us and say, here is the issue, here is the bill, call your legislator, here's the draft script, here's the phone number, right? Putting everything in one place for people to be able to call and take action on. And that's what we're mobilizing. So if you are watching the stream or see this clip later, go to the website that's listed below. It's our state website, nysnaacp.org /rapid response. And we'll provide that for you, right? We'll provide the information, the phone number, everything in one place. And so all you have to do is pick up the phone and call your representative and ensure that they are moving this forward. And that's the agenda we're moving forward right now, Chris, right?
Absolutely. And Chair Szilagyi, as we, close out these final days of session, I mean, what do you think are kind of priorities that are starting to bubble up from this agenda that there's support for across both houses? Obviously, the community has called out for reform in some way, shape, or form. Do we have confidence in any particular items to get through across this agenda?
I think the independent oversight is very important. There were points when we saw the death of Robert Brooks and we didn't have access to autopsy results or camera footage or just plain old information for the family. And so my belief is that creating an independent authority, aside from, docs or even the state legislature, authority that is not accountable to politics, but can really look at the health and safety of incarcerated folks and also those working within the correctional facility, looking at the whole ecosystem and seeing what we can do to actually make improvements. And then on top of that, having the advocacy and the personal stories can really give us a pathway where we can create true public safety in our communities. Because at the end of the day, that's what everyone wants, public safety. And so we want to ensure that folks have access to education, access to job training, access to treatment while being in correctional facilities. But we can't have that unless we have, transparency, accountability, oversight, and ensuring that, the bad actors are kicked out in a manner that's quick and swift.
Absolutely. Appreciate that so much, Chair. I got one more before we let you go. I saw at least one of those bills, the in-person visiting. We had a a pause of visitation during COVID that ended up kind of extending for some time, where there were people able to get in to visit their loved ones who are incarcerated in state correctional facilities. I saw that bill has moved through the Senate. Any chances that's going to be able to move through the Assembly soon?
So we're working on this. The like I said before, our leaders are being very responsive to our package. We just had a conversation about the package, and folks are agreeing on a set of 10 bills. And a lot of the initiatives that you mentioned and others are going to be put forth in this legislative session, but it's going to require a continued fight from our community. So, anything is possible at the end of the session. I've learned that, and your membership will learn. Things may happen, things may pop up. Some items may be successful, others might fail, but that doesn't mean that it's the end of the story. It requires participation. I always say government is a participation sport. If you're not involved, you're going to be left behind. You don't want to be on the bench. You want to be in the game. So come on, let's play.
Well, we definitely appreciate you, appreciate your leadership, your whole team, and of course, all of the members of the caucus who are standing up for New Yorkers, both in the streets and those who are sometimes forgotten behind bars. So we appreciate you. And again, thanks for joining us today. And, we're going to talk a little bit more about some of the justice and reform agenda in our next conversation. So we appreciate you.
Thank you. Take care.
Thank you. All right. Next up, we have Jose Saldana, a longtime advocate for those who are incarcerated in state facilities, a longtime friend, somebody I've worked in partnership with for a long time. Jose, we're excited to have you here, and of course to hear about your story, what you're fighting for as we close out session, and to give folks some deeper understanding of the work that you do. So I'll start with this. Tell us about yourself. Tell us about some of the work that you do and you've been doing for a long time.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much for having me. Can y'all hear me clearly?
We got you.
Okay, good. This is a new setting for me. I've never been on it. I'm Jose Saldana. I'm the executive director of the Release Aging People in Prison. I'm also formerly incarcerated. I was released in 2018 after 38 years of incarceration, denied with parole, released repeatedly by really former police officers, former sheriffs, deputies, and detectives. They just couldn't see past the crime that I committed in 1979. So they would just deny me parole over and over for the nature of the crime. So 25 years to life turned into 38 years. So this is why I'm so committed. There's an injustice there. There was an injustice done to my family. And we advocate for 2 parole bills, man, that would actually serve as a corrective measure to these injustices. I don't think there's any doubts that there's a racial disparity in the sentencing in New York State, all over the country, really, but I talk about New York State. Black folks are more inclined to get life sentences, death by incarceration sentences, life without parole sentences than their white counterparts. And then at the back end, in the release, there's a disparity there too. We're 3 times more likely to be denied parole. Yeah. All things being equal, we're going to be doing more time coming in, more time before we get out. So these are 2 things, man, that just can't be denied. The question is how do we fix this? Yeah. Really.
Well, tell us about the bills that you've been pushing for both this session and in previous sessions, and trying to increase the rate of release at parole determinations and decarcerate New York State prisons.
Well, elder parole bill is the first bill we'll talk about. It provides that if a person has reached the age of 55 years old and has served 15 years, they will be entitled to a parole interview, not an automatic release. Like some people want to say, well, you go to interview, you're not going to get released. But you're entitled to a parole release. And what the value of this bill is that, we know that at the height of mass incarceration, people were just, black folks, brown folks were getting more time than anybody else. I've seen 16-year-old kids coming in, 16 years old, and they're in their mid-50s now, 40 years later. That's an injustice. If white kids were coming in at that rate, at that young age, there would be mass outrage. But there was an outrage because there were Puerto Rican and black kids. We have to correct that. These kids did not deserve to spend their entire lives in prison. It's just totally an injustice to them and their families. And it's a fact that we get more time than anybody else. So rather than ignore it, let's try to address it on the back end. Give everybody the opportunity to appear before the parole board. The second bill is to make sure.
Before you go on to the second bill, I just wanted to make a point and ask this follow-up question. You yourself were an elder within New York State facilities, and correction officers will know that the older folks kind of help keep things together. They mentor folks. They make sure people, kind of really stay out of trouble during that time of incarceration. A skill that you've talked about pretty often of what those older folks who are incarcerated right now are doing in state facilities. I think everybody would say we'd love to have those folks home and be able to provide that same mentorship on the streets. We've invested pretty heavily in anti-gun violence initiatives and mentorship. I think that mentorship will be valued on the outside, don't you think?
Absolutely. Let me say, you mentioned that. I'm really glad you did, because I did not become the human being that I am today in a vacuum. Mm-hmm. I did not become the human being I am today because of the Department of Correction. Elder people took me under their wings. Simple, nothing complicated. They gave me and others just like me a chance. They said, follow 3 rules that we're about to put on this board. If you follow these 3 rules, you will not only empower yourself, you will free yourself from this prison and any other prison that you're in. Mentally, spiritually, emotionally. The first rule, get out as soon as possible. Simple, right? But it entails a lot that you can't do to keep yourself in. The second rule, get out a better human being. A little more difficult to strive to be. The third rule, help somebody else follow these 3 rules. And let me tell you, the men who were in that first class that we went to, one of them is teaching at Yale. Another one is teaching at Cardozo Law School. Another one is teaching at Columbia University. We got executive directors in the criminal and social justice who were in this class. This is what the elders did. They helped a younger generation, my generation and generation after me, transform their lives. And this is the benefit it gives our families and our communities and eventually our society. That while I was in prison, I'm typical of everybody else. My family lived in perpetual poverty. I didn't know it until I got out. My family lived in perpetual poverty because it causes to stay together, keep a family together. It causes them that money that they don't have. And in the 8 years that I've been home, I uplifted my family out of perpetual poverty. We all do that. That's beautiful. That is the benefit. We uplift our families from perpetual poverty, and we know one of the greatest things that fuel crime and violence in our community is poverty.
Absolutely. And so going on to the second bill, fair and timely, we know that you had multiple instances and interviews in front of the parole board, multiple denials. And I think Fair and Timely does a little bit to address that by ensuring that the actual record of the individual is what's in review, not just the original crime of conviction. Tell us a little about what's
the Fair and Timely parole bill will require the New York State Parole Board to first, if they're going to make a determination that you pose a danger to public safety, they cannot measure that exclusively on the crime of conviction. Mm-hmm. In other words, if you're going to be denied parole like I was, based for the crime, that's it. No other reason for the crime. If you can perpetually deny that, you are actually suspending my eligibility for parole because the crime is never going to change. There has to be something else that you deny. If a person was sentenced to a parole eligible sentence, that's exactly what it means. it doesn't mean that you could suspend this eligibility until you get ready or until you figure a person has been punished enough. You know, we have people that are in today that have been denied parole for 25 extra years. That means that their sentence has been changed to life without parole.
Yeah.
That's what it means. And again, if we allow people to return back to their families at an age where they can be productive, again, we go back to the economics of it. Why release somebody at 75, 80 years old? What can he do? Can he give back? Can he take advantage of what he's learned and give it back? No, if you release him at a relatively younger age, 55 is relatively young for somebody like me. I'm 74 now. If they would have let me out at 55, I mean, I'll have a house. My brothers will have a house. Yeah. You know, I mean, we'd be living the American dream.
Yeah,
and I know the value of labor.
Yeah, but you know, you point to 55 being younger, and this is my last comment here. But the truth is, because of how difficult and how strenuous on the body and the lack of access to care individuals who are incarcerated in state prisons are, 55 is really that age of mortality. You know, where we see a lot of folks pass away during that time of incarceration. And of course, talking about so many folks who've been incarcerated, you know, whether during this period of mass incarceration over the last 40 years. So extreme concern still of that age. But yes, it would be much more easy for folks to contribute and reintegrate in society if they're released at an earlier date.
And you know, average age of death for somebody 50 and over in New York State is 57 years old. 57 years old. When I started reaching my late 50s, I thought everybody around me is dying in their late 50s, early 60s. I thought that I might be next. And in fact, I told the parole commissioners one time, I said, listen, you can do whatever you want. I can't change that. But there's one thing you can't change. I'm going to die an honorable man, whether it's in prison or with my family. Now let's start this hearing. And you know, the chair of the parole commissioner acknowledged that in a letter to me, and she apologized for being on that panel that denied me. The chair of the New York State Parole Board apologized because she's saying that the evidence of who I was before her, and she refused to acknowledge it.
Well, we appreciate you, all of the work that you've done and continue to do on behalf of those who are incarcerated. Thank you so much, Jose. We're going to keep fighting for you.
Okay.
And of course, if you want to
just as a reminder, again, these two bills that you mentioned, Chris, and thanks so much to Jose for providing that testimony, but it's also a testimony to action, to not only he has lived the process that we want to happen, right? That it should be about rehabilitation. It should be about investing and not just this cruel punishment that I think our system has turned into. And so I appreciate Jose, thank you so much for sharing that. And it provides the context by in which we need to think about the reform of the system that we have right now. And so that's a part of our, legislative agenda, those bills that we're pushing. And I think the distinction that he made, that it's not that it just is an automatic out. It provides you an opportunity to be able to get an interview to move forward, right? So it's, it's just the opportunity, providing the opportunity, let the individual cases play out as they may. But, and that's what happens a lot when we're talking about justice reform in general, is people paint it as these people are bad, or they committed this bad act and it must be a forever stain, right? And not that they have nothing to contribute to society or to us as a whole. And so really educating people about that reform in a time where people are, rolling back, right? We just saw, debates here in the city, people not correcting the action and trying to say that the reform that we've done so far maybe it was a mistake. And I'm like, really? All of y'all on stage gonna act like, like this. I was a little taken aback like that. I was like, yeah, everybody gonna act like, okay, all right, I see you.
We've talked about this before, and my frustration is that everybody seems to forget how we got to the reform, right? It was the problem. And now you blame the reform instead of the problem.
Right.
Doesn't make sense to me.
Or the fact they're just like, we need new cops. I was like, do we need cops, or do we need social workers and people with mental health professionals and stuff to address the issue as to the reason why people get into, like, it's not the cops we need, it's other professionals that we need and need to pay them a fair wage in order to deal with the larger public safety issue. It's not the cop. Okay, maybe.
Too quick.
Living in an alternative world.
Transition to our next conversation, our next issue. We don't give the death penalty in New York, so denying repeatedly for parole is effectively that. Then don't give them the parole. You know, that's the conundrum we put ourselves in. And then secondly, we've incentivized people going to classes. We fund higher education in prisons. People have professional training they can achieve in prisons, and giving them an opportunity for that credit to be used to support their rehabilitation and their release. All of that is a part of the larger effort. And we used to have prison branches in the NAACP, the state conference.
We will again.
We will again.
We will again. We will again have prison branches in New York State and organizing folks in that way. But we can talk about that later. One thing as a transition to the person we're going to talk next, we were going to talk about education, but I want to shift really quick because I think ISIS will be quick. One of our bills is on democracy in detention. And really focusing on people that are in the pre-trial stage where they haven't yet been convicted for something. They are still eligible to vote if they are, registered, or getting them registered in order to participate in the process. And that's one of the bills I know that we are pushing as well. But we do have someone, I'm acting like I'm at my podcast, and I'm like, to bring to the front of the class, I got to keep remembering that I'm not there. But Assemblywoman Latrice Walker, who is the election law chair, and her chief of staff, Isis McIntosh Green, to talk about what is being pushed forward as it pertains to voting rights in these final days of the session. Oh no, her audio is not good. Oh my goodness. I need to change mics or something like that, because unfortunately your mic is not connected or not using the correct one. But Chris, maybe while she's doing that, in terms of talking about some of the bills that we are part of from the voting rights standpoint.
Absolutely. And so we've got a couple that we've been pushing pretty heavily this session. And we'll love to hear from ISIS, and really shout out to Latrice Walker, who is a rock star Assemblywoman out of Brooklyn, NAACP member of the Brooklyn branch, shows up to everything. I don't know how she makes it around to everything. She does.
I'm surprised she's not here, because she does literally show up to everything, and will pull her membership card out. Like, yeah, she a member.
Absolutely. And so we've got one bill that essentially automates voter registration. We passed a similar measure, or a partial measure, a couple of years ago in the state. And right now in the houses, the Senate has already passed this updated measure. The Assembly has not. It's called Enhanced Automatic Voter Registration. Essentially, when you're visiting, when you're registering for a license, when you're going to the DMV for a particular service, making sure that you're automatically registered to vote. They clean up the rolls, and you get sent essentially follow-up package to choose a party, and so that you have information on your polling locations, etc. That's one of the bills that we're supporting and pushing heavily. We also have a bill that we support that actually came to us from some of our youth advocates, a bill that would allow them to vote in a primary if they're 17, but will be of age before the general election. Excited to support that bill as well. And then, of course, the one that Isis is going to be here to talk about with us, democracy during detention. Isis, you want to give it a shot again? not working there.
Oh no. So can you just talk a bit about when we talk about, again, because people think that we're like rolling voting booths into prisons where, and they're like, do we want people who've convicted of a crime to vote? And like part of me is like, well, if they voted, I mean, but like that's another legislation for another time.
Yeah. Well, we do still have felony disenfranchisement in the state of New York, which means once you're convicted of a felony and during your time of incarceration, you cannot vote. But for people who are in local jails, which, Rikers, for those in New York City, counts as a local jail, or some of the local, county facilities count as local jails. Oftentimes folks are there in advance before they've actually been convicted of an offense. In that time, they can still participate in the electoral process. And so right now, we've got people who are incarcerated or really being detained in local jails all across the state, and their local correctional facilities that is housing them is not making every effort to make sure that they can still vote. Democracy During Detention Act is really an election bill, but it's been framed as a correction law change. It's just incentivizing the local boards of elections to show up, have a plan of engagement for folks who are currently being held. You can end up waiting for a trial, any time from 30 days to 6 months. In that time, an election may have come and gone. You may even be voting for or against the district attorney that's got you behind bars right now. And so it's really just an effort to make sure that the local boards of elections are implementing programs, that they're connecting with the people who are currently being detained, and that they are still able to exercise their constitutional right to participate in our elections. And so I just want to, one, shout out ISIS, who has been a great driver and chief of staff for, again, a rock star assembly member. These leaders need strong staff around them that can help make sure that, the right issues are being pushed in the right way, that the community is being educated. And I really hope we can get ISIS on one more time here because they've done a lot of work, and I really hope that they're able to say some positive things about this. But it's a bill that we think is a simple, really straightforward, common sense law. Again, just making sure that folks who are being detained can still vote. All right.
Thank you so much for that. We're going to shift really quickly, and again, thank ISIS for attempting to make for making the time to join us. We really appreciate that. And appreciate, as a former staffer, as both Chris and I were former staffers, we will always shout out the staff working with elected officials who are underpaid and work, extra long hours to ensure that these things are happening. So ISIS, if you can hear us, thank you so much for your continued work, and all of the staff that are eating donuts, pizza, and surviving on coffee right now in terms of these final days of session. Right, Chris?
It is a rough life. And I know everybody's excited for it to be done, but, almost there.
Almost there. All right. I want to shift to education really quick, because that's also a very important part of the work that we are doing. And we have a dynamic, a very thoughtful and intense leader as it pertains to education. Our state education chair, Christine Waters. Listen to me. If you want somebody to be on it in terms of an advocate for our children's education, you want Christine Waters to be there. Hey, Christine.
Hey, how you doing?
I'm doing good. Listen, there's a lot of shenanigans happening as it pertains to education across New York State. And, most people are focused on what is happening on the federal level with the administration sort of closing the Department of Education. Again, under the guise that they want states to control education. Newsflash, states already control education. It's states that we're battling most of the time when it comes to education. In the case of New York, Christine?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. But we have to be very glad that we are in New York, because there are certain laws that don't exist in any of the other states. And some of what's happened with the federal level of the Office of Civil Rights is that it's basically gone back to the states, and it's going to be up to us as a state conference to make sure that we continue to stand up for what's right for our children.
Well, what are some of the things we're battling here in the state? So as you said that, yes, there are some things, the protections and things that we have in New York State. And also because the state is friendlier in terms of equity and justice, friendlier, not saying 100%, friendlier.
Right.
But what are some of the things that we as a state conference and you as the education chair and the committee are pushing forward and doing in this legislative cycle?
Well, one of the things that's happened is that funds had been cut, but our governor has actually provided more money for school lunch programs. And then we also have this issue with the funding for Head Start being cut. So we're trying to still work with our state education department to make sure that those things are still provided for in some way. The other thing is that because there are unprecedented funds coming, we have an issue where there are more applications that have been sent to SUNY to form more charter schools. And what ends up happening with charter schools is that the funds get diverted from the public sector to pay for the tuition and the transportation costs. So we've seen quite a few more pushes to be able to have that. But what we really need to do is get people engaged in the regular schools to be able to hold on to that funding and be able to provide for our children, especially when it comes to special education needs. Those are things that are going to be provided in the public school setting that they are not bound to honor if they are taken out and put into a private sector. So we are pushing to be able to have NAACP, New York State Education Department, become the oversight for approval of new charter schools. It's not that we are against all charter schools, but we are against the ones that are for profit and that are being run by people who have no real experience except in marketing and business. Our children are not for sale. So we want to make sure that our children the funding is remaining for the programs that exist in the public school system. The other thing that's happening is that there are more people being, I want to say, disrespected and provoked into being suspended from school because of the disrespect that's going on. Parents are also being demonized and being blamed for the things that are happening with their children. I was particularly interested in the previous conversation that talked about how we get more time for our adults that are incarcerated. Well, the same thing has been happening with the use of the Dignity for All Students Act, in that there are codes of conduct that when they apply them, they've been applied unevenly. They are giving them extra time than they should, trying to block our children from being able to graduate. They're making sure that they receive what I would call sentences to push them out from school. And this is happening from kindergarten through elementary school, middle school, high school, and college. We had an incident where there's a student that we know of that actually is going to not be able to return to college for an entire year.
Well, Christine, can we jump in here? I mean, we've done and you've done, and I know the amount of direct calls for intervention that you field on a regular basis to support these students. Now, from our purview, and I think this is something that everybody's pretty much experiencing, this increase in harassment, derogatory statements and actions, racist behavior being demonstrated by young people towards other young people is definitely an offshoot of a shift in culture happening, and a pretty bad example being set by the person in charge in DC right now. Talk a little bit more about what solutions, not suspensions, would do to restrict the use of suspensions as a remedial measure in classrooms.
Right. Well, most people are familiar with the DASA law, the Dignity for All Students Act, and there are codes of conduct that that go along with that. But there's a second part of being able to have children out from school for a period of time. During that time, there are supposed to be restorative practices that and intervention strategies that are applied so that the children can return to school. And so that's basically what solutions, not suspensions, are about. We need to be able to find a way to connect to what it is that's causing them to get suspended. We need to be able to equip our administrators, our teachers, to being able to connect with the students so that they can identify what those things are and help to prevent it. And we need a system in place that will actually allow the administrators and teachers to do that. The solutions, not suspensions, would enable the type of training that's necessary to be able to make those types of connections.
Something else
to prevent that zero tolerance policy.
Something else I think is incredibly important about that bill is, we experienced an incredible amount of learning loss, right? Of kids who are, outside of the classroom and having very little engagement with their educators, with their classmates, and of course, just with the material. And I believe
there's a shortage of teachers in New York State. Yeah. So when they are out from school, they're supposed to have instruction in their major subjects. Sometimes it happens. Sometimes they can't find someone to actually provide those services. But then on top of it, for instance, we had an example of a student who was getting her academic services, and she was a top student. These are not students that are constantly in trouble and failing. These are students who were high up on their list in the classes. And this particular child had a course in welding. Now, obviously, she was supposed to be able to be provided with all of the things that she would have had in school, but you obviously cannot do welding at home. And so we had to fight, or we had to locate someone who could go with that child and that parent when they went for a hearing. It took a while for us to be even able to get a hearing because they, again, wanted to suspend her for the rest of the year. She would have lost her license for the welding. She would have not been able to graduate. She would have not been able to participate in any of the activities that a normal senior would. And we were not going to stand for that. And we were able to win. And get her back into school. Now, she missed school. You said stolen time is really what it is. From January, when it first happened, she did not get back into school until April the 7th, that week. And that amounts to stolen time, an enormous amount of stress. There's no way that our parents should have to deal with this kind of thing. There needs to be a procedure in place to remedy these things.
We appreciate that. And I got one more just as we, and push up on time here. We got a question in the chat about funding, a couple of questions about funding. Now, the budget session has ended, and you were engaged, of course, in making sure that every school and every student was receiving the appropriate amount of funding as we went through those conversations. Do you want to highlight just kind of a bit about how that works briefly before we transition?
In terms of the funding for education, again, there's unprecedented amount of money that's coming to your district. For example, the cell phone ban that they've implemented from bell to bell. There is extra funding for being able to set up your program. And right now, everyone should be getting onto your school safety, culture, and climate committee to be able to come up with the policy and plan for your particular building that has to be submitted by September of this year. So you should be making those meetings, setting up those meetings now to be part of the conversation. And as they say, if they don't have a seat for you at the table, bring a folding chair and make sure they know that you need to be able to be in on the input for the policy that's developed within your district. Of course, they're going to be able to adjust it as needed. And there are exceptions. For example, children who need the cell phones for translation, children who have medical issues that they need to monitor. And then also the basics are that it should not be a cell phone with internet, because it's about protecting our children. Again, many of the children have been harassed, bullied, and discriminated against with using the internet and the cell phones during the school day. And we need to have a conversation with our community as well, so that it's not happening outside of school either.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Christine. We're bumping up on time, but wanted to thank you for the work that you do on behalf of students across the state on a regular, everyday basis. I'm talking all the time. The incoming is significant, and she's not only working with the parents and with the students, but also with the administrators, with the commissioner of the State Department of Education and others, to make sure that New York's, particularly Black students, have a chance to succeed here. So we want to thank you, Christine, for all the work.
You're welcome. And there is a tip line now for reporting bias and hate that I've sent out to all of the people who have been education chairs. So please pay attention. The people at the Human Rights Commission are very interested in helping to stop the patterns that have been discriminatory and detrimental for our youth. And thank you for everything you're doing.
All right. Thanks, Christine. We're going to turn right back to Isis. Just, we're up on time, but Isis, let's see if this is working now.
Mic check. 1 2 1 2.
There we go. Go. Thank you for being here with us.
Thank you so much for having me, Chris, to L-Joy. I'm so honored to be here serving as Chief of Staff for Assemblywoman Latrice Walker, who has, of course, sponsored legislation from bail reform to the John R. Lewis Voting Rights Act. And now we're here talking about democracy during detention. And I had the opportunity last year in October to actually go to Rikers Island with a number of organizations that are part of this great coalition to be able to register people to vote, to actually go around and collect absentee ballots. But it's really a one-man show going on in terms of collection and submitting to the Board of Elections. And it got to the point where we had to say, if you don't actually make the drop off tomorrow, these votes won't actually be counted. And so it's important that through this legislation that we aren't just doing a piecemeal effort, and that this is happening around the state. I'm not sure if many people know, but as of January 2025, more than 12,000 people were detained in municipal jails in New York State, but not convicted, meaning that likely we're still able to cast the ballot. And that's not even included all of those that may be serving time for misdemeanors that are still eligible.
Absolutely. And, talk to us real quick about that work of engaging with the local correctional facilities. I think in Rikers, we have one single staffer who is literally charged with getting all these absentee ballots in, making sure that people understand kind of what's on the ballot, like one person. But we've seen elsewhere across the state, i.e. Ulster County, where there's a commitment, and all of government commitment to make this happen. And it's been successful without hiccup, and has cost no money. Tell us a little bit about what we think this can look like in implementation.
So what this bill would actually do is to ensure that all legally eligible New Yorkers, including those detained in pretrial or serving the misdemeanor sentences, get the same treatment as essentially we would do with people who are in nursing homes. So what this would require is that the Department of Corrections works with the Board of Elections to ensure that one measure is taken. So in some cases, it may be an absentee ballot program. In other cases, it would actually be looking and actually implementing a polling place, which is really the ultimate goal.
Absolutely. And it's not mandatory. The polling place will be something that will be decided by that local government. If that's the approach they want to take, that's the easiest way to effectuate this provision. But one quick note before we leave. Isis, do you think that this bill has some legs before we get to the close of session? I know we have a great champion, but let us know what do you think is the outlook right now?
So I think elected officials really need to hear from you as we get to the last days. And I heard us ask earlier, when does session really end? The Senate is going to be leaving Thursday and the Assembly extended, as you mentioned before, into next week, June 17th. And so it's important that we are, as the NAACP, but also others that are looking to get involved, are calling on the elected officials to actually pass this legislation. Doing letter writing campaigns and also generating more awareness in our communities about this issue. A lot of times as well, when we're doing the signups, we have an upcoming race where early voting starts on June 14th and primary day is June 24th. This is the time that we need you not just to call elected officials, but also encourage folk to actually get registered. A lot of times when folk are behind bars, they don't actually know what address are they registering at, how is their ballot going to be collected. And so, of course, there are some resources that's going to be required to make this a statewide mandate, but really what we need is to raise the awareness around the issue. And so I appreciate organizations like the NAACP raising awareness on this. And I will say, worse things have happened. So why can't the things that are going to benefit our community be the things that we get across the finish line? At the end, there's always something called the big ugly. This is what we need to get put into it. So thank you so much for having us. Assemblywoman Latrice Walker is, of course, your champion here in Albany, representing the communities of Brownsville, Bed-Stuy, East Flatbush, and Crown Heights, which are some of the communities that are mostly impacted by this.
Well, thank you so much, Isis. So good to see you. And thank you. We got the audio working.
I'm happy we did. I'll see you all next time.
Bye, Isis.
See you, Eljoy.
We're gonna keep
listen, all of this is the reason why you need to be a part of the rapid response team. Right now, you can go to the state website. It's on the screen right now. These are the things that we need to activate around and make sure that people are, when these come up, it can't just be us talking in our same bubble, Chris. As you and I know, we have to use our power, not just on social media. We do social media for the exposure, to bring other people to the table. But the connection to power is actually communicating with those who represent us, and having them get calls from their constituents that I need you to sign on to this bill. I need you to be a co-sponsor. I need you to vote for this bill to come to, for it to go to the floor. I need this to be funded. Like, that is the next step. I think we got good, the sharing on social media. I think we got that down back. I think the next step, particularly when you join this rapid response team, is how do we move that to power? And for this next iteration of the NAACP New York State Conference, we are about building Black political power, and not just for numbers' sake. We want to be able to move budgets, to move legislation, and move people to action. And so that is why you need to be a part of the rapid response team. You need to become a member of NAACP and engage in that way. You can also do that on our website, nysnaacp.org. But then you also be a part of the rapid response team and being able to share that information widely. Now, we have one more person before we wrap up. I know it's long, I know. But Chris, we could not. We could not have this conversation. We could not be in community together and not have representation from the NAACP New York State Youth and College Division. Miles, we couldn't do that, could we?
Couldn't do it. And you didn't. And I'm very glad to be here.
So now we had you last. Next time we'll have you first. We'll do the bounce, and then then you can host, and then other folks can host, right? In part of these monthly briefings. But Chris and Miles, y'all have something to bring up, something else that we are pushing for in this latest, in this final days of the legislative session. Absolutely.
Another Latrice Walker special. we happen to be in alignment where all of her bills are getting pushed heavily by the state conference, and mostly because she's advocating for the right things, the things that we care about. And as we said earlier, there's a lot of our agenda is about kind of dealing with the current context and climate that we're in now. We've seen a decision last year by the Supreme Court largely throwing out affirmative action. And we've seen, of course, institutions across the country abandon that criteria that would allow them to elevate diversity. We're also seeing direct attacks from the administration at institutions like Harvard and others for their diversity programming, even outside of just admissions decisions, including in terms of research, programming, etc. So we got a bill, Miles, and it's not controversial. At the same time, it seems to be controversial, but it is one that I think addresses really the evaluation point of making a determination whether or not somebody should get a chance to go to one of these prestigious higher education institutions. So, Miles, tell us a little bit about the Fair College Admissions Act.
Absolutely. So again, thank you for having me on. I'm so happy and honored to be in our community as always. A big part in underscored conversation in our community right now is the Fair College Admissions Act, which bans legacy admissions in New York State, allowing for fair college admission, making sure that leaders from all across New York State who are in pursuit of higher education are able to do so on a fair basis without having to compete against those who were admitted into the university on unearned opportunity, unearned privilege. I want to be clear that legacy admissions, despite what anyone says, is a full op, as we say in Gen Z term, to NAACP, New York State Youth in College, and our conference at large, because we see how disproportionate Black people and Black young scholars are being affected by legacy admissions. We're seeing, since the Supreme Court case of affirmative action, the de-enrollment of students from Ivy League and higher education institutions up to numbers like 40 and 50%, which is not only sick, it's unacceptable, frankly. And if we have a tool in our toolbox to change that and to affect that, we will simply use it. As President Eljoy Williams shared, there is power in what our organization stands for, and there is power in numbers. And so part of introducing legacy admissions ban through the Fair College Admissions Act, championed by Assemblywoman Latrice Walker, we are able to showcase our power and fight for that diversity that we actually want to see in colleges, and do so the right way.
Well, let's talk about the politics of it for a second, because we see now, 92, 93 institutions have already stopped using legacy status as the determining factor in applications and admissions. What do you think is kind of holding up New York? We have, of course, some Ivy League institutions and some other private institutions that have been able to, continue feeding into the system, and New York has kind of been kind of slow. Many other states have already gone away with legacy admissions. What do you think is holding up this decision here in New York?
I'm going to be very frank, as I've been my entire life. I cut straight to the point. I think it is unchecked privilege by white elite folk who have not met the conversation on, or met the moment, frankly, on what real equity and real opportunity looks like for a safer and more peaceful community. That unchecked moment in those political boardrooms with those political legislators and bold heads is what is keeping us back. Legacy admissions hurt Black and brown students the most, as we have seen. So those in upper positions of power in colleges who are bragging about diversity but are keeping legacy seats reserved for the wealthy and white are simply being hypocritical. That is something that we cannot ignore. And in no day, on no planet, has any member, leader, or branch of NAACP been not bold or unbold. And in this moment, we are calling on our boldness. We're calling on our leaders to be bold, because this is a big roadblock in getting this very, very, very passable bill, as 75% of Americans do agree that this should be banned in America, or particularly in New York State, from getting passed. What we need to do now is simply organize ourselves. And that's what our moment is right now. That's what I'm leading as president of the NAACP, New York State Youth in College, as a national rep, leading Region 2, which is overseeing almost all of the entire Ivy League colleges, really pushing that young people are not only in this fight, but we're saying, listen, it's fair, it's understood, we're well educated on it, and we have seen the numbers. We are now showing up in our calls to action, which looks like, especially in New York State, calling our legislators. My team is working on a graphic that will be posted right after this. Spam her office, spam the offices. Let's get it out of its place right now and make sure that it is voted on and becomes law in New York State. Because at the end of the day, as shared before, we have on no day been afraid of our boldness. And this moment calls for our boldness, and fair college admissions looks like the new diversity, the same diversity Trump claims to be calling for, the same diversity that all his administration and all these political pundits are being placed in, saying, we want this, let's ban affirmative action and get this. This is the moment to stand on it. So we're going to continue to stand on business as we always have. And I'm very glad to do so as president.
We appreciate that. I just want to clarify and emphasize what you're hearing right now from Miles. This is, you use the term reserve seats, right? Legacy reserve seats. Now, these institutions essentially have a population that they want to ensure that their alum, et cetera, are able to go to the institutions that they went to, and the administrations allow that to be the case. Now, I went to Syracuse. I would love for my daughter to go to Syracuse, but we want to be able to get there. If she's not being benefited off of being a person of color or Black, she needs to get there on her ability to execute on this academic and perform academically. And right now, that's not the case for everybody. And so, this bill, should it become law, would effectuate really equity in practice, ensuring that people who, in the same way, when affirmative action work to created opportunities, this would ensure that more opportunities are able to be created by taking away that reserve. And we do all this work in coalition. And I want to shout out, of course, NICLU. We do a lot of work with the New York Civil Liberties Union. That's the New York arm of the ACLU. And we do a lot of work with a lot of different coalitions that we heard from today, including the Release Aging Peoples in Prison Coalition and others. And so we just want to shout out the coalition partners that we have and we continue to work with on a day-to-day basis. Thank you so much, Miles, for joining us for this moment. Turning it back to you, LJ.
Thank you.
Thank you, Miles. Thank you so much. You see the turn it back to the reporter. It's what happens when the camera turns on. Like immediately, like people become, tap into their inner dournalist.
Doing what I can.
And then, lead into that language. All right, we're gonna wrap this up. We promise monthly briefings in the future. We're going to try to keep them to 30 minutes. I don't know how we're going to try to do that with all of the information and all of the things that we are doing on a regular basis, but we will do our best to do that. In the meantime, Chris, as these final days come to a close, this is the reason why we need you to be connected to NAACP. We are building the infrastructure to wield Black political power here in New York State. And that is not only being involved and engaged in elections, that's being involved in every budget and every legislative cycle on the local, the county, the state, and through our national office, through the federal level. And there is no other organization in the state that has the footprint that we have, that has the membership that we have, that is focused on the improvement and the thriving future of Black people, like the NAACP New York State Conference. And that's where we need you to be a part of. So if you are not already a member, Chris, where can they go to become a
You can go straight to nysnaacp.org/membership. It is $30 to be a member of the NAACP for an annual membership. We encourage you to get activated with your local branch. We are doing all that we can to engage with our leaders in Albany and governments across the state. Please come be a part of the solution.
Right. And then we will be sharing all of this and more. So if you're saying this was good information, you want to share it with other people, you can follow us on social media and connect with all of our accounts on Facebook, on Instagram, on LinkedIn, on YouTube. We're going to have, the New York State Conference YouTube channel as well. was formerly known as Twitter, but I'm always going to refer to it as Twitter because that's what that's what their mama named them. So I'm going to refer to it as that, even though it's not Twitter anymore. You can follow us on social media, and we will chop this up so that they can be in a way that you can share this with people and post them in the WhatsApp communities and the Facebook groups and all of the things that you are a part of. Share it with your chapter, all of that information. And then finally, we need you. If you don't do one thing today, say you don't want to sign up for the rapid response team right now. I got you. All right. You need to see more information. I got you. But what I do need you to do today is make a plan and a pledge to vote, because it is not just the federal elections to be involved in. So I hope you are not sitting out and waiting until the midterm elections, because there are elections happening here in the state, all across the state, in Albany, in Buffalo, in New York City. There are elections happening, and you can go to our website and make your pledge to vote, be a part of our Get Out the Vote operations. Our branches all across the state are working on the primary elections. There you can learn, make sure you verify your voter registration, make your plan to vote, and you can sign up to volunteer to help encourage others and educate others about the primary process. So again, you can go to our website. Our website is the hub, nysnaacp.org/vote 2025. That is what you can share, and you can tell people to make their plan and make sure that they are voting. So thank you to all of you who stuck it out with us in watching and being a part of this briefing today. We will continue to share this information. I need you to know that New York State Conference of Branches is active. I need you to know that our branches, over 50 branches across this state, are working hard every day. These volunteers who are working every single day on these issues, on this work, and we will continue to bring you the information so that you can tap in, you can be connected. So that way, when you hear people in the street talking about what the NAACP is doing, you can tune them into this YouTube, to this Instagram, and you can see the New York State Conference is active and engaged, and that's where I want to be. So thank you, everybody. Have a good night, and see you in them streets.